Hello and welcome to Wild and Brave. I'm Coach Morgan here with you today for our summer series. We are covering some interesting topics on what we call deep work. Our total focus here this summer is to start building community on YouTube where you can come join us for some wild ideas, learn to take more brave action in your life so that you can thrive and really reach the meaningful goals that you have in your life, fulfill your potential. We're glad that you're here. If you're with us live, you can say hello to us in the comments. If you're catching this replay, we still want to hear what you have to say. So don't be shy. Share along in the comments as you go. The people who watch after you will be excited to see what you have to bring to the conversation as well. In this series called Building a Deep Work Practice, we are really focusing on creating a room in our life, a consistent rhythm where we have the room to pursue big goals, passionate ideas that we can cultivate meaning in an ongoing basis without chronically being exhausted, overworked, or trying to protect ourselves from overwork and ending up with what can feel like a kind of flat, sub-potential reaching life. So deep work is what we're pursuing here. We actually borrow this idea or this term from Cal Newport in his book Deep Work. This isn't a study of his book, but it is a term we like to give him credit for because he did a lot of really productive thinking on the topic of deep work that we find useful when we try to make progress on big meaningful things in a world that is full of noise, competing needs and distractions, and really just making space to reach your potential. One of the topics Cal really digs into that sometimes is less of a focus for us here at Wild and Brave is the idea of being someone who can compete in an increasingly difficult and kind of striated job market. And if you want to be the best in the world, to be able to compete for the attractive, high-paying, or interesting, fascinating jobs, if you want to try to eliminate some of the chronic uncertainty and insecurity that a lot of us have in our work life, one of the only ways to do that is really to become excellent and to learn and adapt quickly. In his book, he focuses a lot on helping you cultivate the space and the practice of being able to learn difficult things and acquire skills quickly and do it consistently throughout your life. So it's a great book. I personally really loved it, had to buy it. This series that we're going through during the summer covers some additional concepts. For us here at Wild and Brave, the whole point of deep work is that it describes what you become able to do if you cultivate a wild rhythm so that you can have epic growth. Now, we talked last week a little bit about what epic growth looks like, how growth happens, and really thinking about how the rhythm of your life determines your ability to consistently show up to growth, to not constantly be tired. But this week, our topic is rewilding your work life. On Mondays here, we're testing out a long form format where we dig into some concepts a little bit more deeply. So if you're with us here for a Monday, we're really glad you're here. If you think the pace is slow or that there's just too much content in a single video, we have to say that you're right. Mondays is our chance to have more of a conversation, to develop an idea a little more thoroughly. But if you watch the channel, you'll see short videos that take out specific ideas and present them in quick, easy to squeeze in snippets so that you can focus what you're looking for. So enjoy the long form on Monday, and if you're in a hurry and need to catch a little quick, tiny wild idea or be challenged in a small brave action, just grab one of the shorter videos and you can see some of this content split up. Okay, enough with housekeeping. When you're trying something new, sometimes you have to let people know what's going on. But today is all about rewilding your work life. I don't know if you've ever heard the term rewilding. It's something that I borrowed from ecology. It's a process. I'm actually going to share in the comments one of the, I think, a pretty helpful article on what rewilding is. If you're curious, you can pull it up. You'll see. Whoop, let's grab that for you here. Excellent. And that truenaturefoundation.org just really has great information to help you understand the ecological process of rewilding. The short, unscientific version says that when you take an area and decide it needs to be rewilded, it's because the natural state of the region has become depleted of resources. It has become depleted of resources because the top of the food chain got interrupted or decimated. Now, what happens when the top of the food chain, the big apex predators, are removed from an area is that the smaller scavenger animals proliferate. And so you have lots of little animals eating up all of the resources, all of the food, the water, and the habitats become depleted where they can't consistently sustain a population. So rewilding is a process where you actually focus on the top of the food chain. As much as it seems like it's a resource problem, it's actually not a resource problem. It is a predator problem. If you successfully restore, and this is a theory of rewilding, when you successfully restore the top of the food chain, you then add balance to the scavenger population where the amount of resources that is consumed is able to sustain in an ongoing basis. All right, so that's the short and simple version of what rewilding is. But let's talk about why we care about it for our lives. You may not see yourself as an ecosystem, but your life actually is. You operate and are resourced by the resources of time, finances, focus, your mental clarity, your emotional energy. All of these are resources that are used and consumed by the wildlife in your world. What are the projects? What are the people? What are the opportunities in your life that are consuming resources? If you look at them in terms of a food chain, rewilding takes a minute to say, what is at the top of my meaning food chain? What is the apex predator of my life? Put another way, what are the big, scary, beautiful things that you're trying to accomplish with your life? What are they? What are you trying to do that actually makes it possible for you to see meaning accrue in your life? We're actually going to talk quite a bit about meaning today. But when you start thinking about rewilding your work life, you know that it's time to pay attention to the top of the food chain, those big, scary, beautiful passions, the big, meaningful things that you're pursuing, if you find that your resources are feeling tapped. So, are you tired? Are you chronically frustrated or irritable? Does your store of emotional bandwidth seem constantly low? Are you finding yourself struggling to maintain your own motivation? That's another sign that your resources are low. What in your life seems to be just too much? All right, where is life taking too much from you? Now, let's see, I want to make sure. There we go. When you are in a depleted state, mentally, emotionally, or physically, you may have too many small, we call them scavengers out in the wild world, but in your life, sometimes they're distractions. Sometimes they're small projects. Sometimes the things consuming your resources don't do very much with those resources. I actually think of this as something called an asymmetry in resource consumption. Think about it for a second. You give your time a lot of places. If you just think of a couple of them, you can maybe list them on, one hand. A couple of the things that you give your internal resources to. You probably give some time to building relationships in your family. And you probably give some time to specific friends. Maybe you invest time and money in your education, specific thing that you're learning. Maybe you're putting emotional energy into pursuing advancement at work, right? What are some of those things you're putting time and energy to? Now, if you look at some of them, you can even sometimes you need to be careful to look at the small things. For example, if you are trying to get your garage organized and you're holding yourself mentally, responsible to make progress on that consistently. That is one of the things that's consuming your mental and emotional bandwidth, possibly. All right, so those things, when you look at them, some of the things you give energy to give energy back. Volunteering opportunities often very much feel this way. I've recently started volunteering with the Crisis Text Line. And if you've never heard of the Crisis Text Line, I would love for you to check them out. It's an online resource where you can literally text in when you're in crisis and get some support. It's excellent. I'll put their information in the chat as well so that you can check it out. But when I volunteer, the volunteers, sometimes I'm putting 2 hours into my volunteer shift at a time. Solid time. It's definitely my mental focus, and emotional energy is always consumed, right? Whenever I volunteer. You're being there for someone in crisis. Why wouldn't it take energy? Then I can look at that's the input. And the output, what energy comes back to me. Because I find volunteering very meaningful, and the Crisis Text Line lets me volunteer in a very supported team based environment. I have supervisors, I have colleagues there for help, I have many resources, right? It's not just taking my knowledge, I'm in a system that gives me support. I find that after a very resource demanding shift, I actually have a resource rebound where I'm less tired, where I find that my brain has had a break from all of the little worries and frustrations and distractions. It's a 2 hour Sabbath of the mind where I can be away from myself and be present to helping someone else. And I find that I get more energy back than I put in. Whatever you do that you find deeply meaningful, especially if it's helping people, if you can see or quantify in some way how you are showing up for others, you get an asymmetrical payoff. What you put in, more comes out. That is the sign of a big top of the food chain type wild animal in your life. It's one of the wild things that restores the balance of energy in your life. Think of a relationship you have that you really treasure. Someone in your life who does a lot to support and encourage you emotionally. Or maybe there's one of your friends who stretches your thinking, right? When they show up for you or you spend time with them, what you get back from that relationship is often more than what you put in. It's another example of a relationship that has that rewilding effect in your life. What are the things that you're learning that are stretching you and making you feel more whole, that are making you feel challenged but also bigger? What are those things? Those are the types of things that rewild your life. Okay, so that asymmetrical resource consumption says that the time input and the energy input does not always equal the energy we get out of something. If we get very specific about this, there's a particular type of task that's on your checklist that falls in the category of asymmetrical and what I call a net negative payoff? Or sometimes they can be net zero. Let's look at both of those. So a net negative payoff for your resources or a net zero payoff for your resources. Think of your checklist right now and identify something. You may be able to do this from the top of your head. Identify something that you're behind on finishing. Most of us have something like this. We thought we would get it done yesterday or before the weekend wrapped up, and we didn't. All right. As long as that is still on your list and you are holding yourself to doing it, but you see that it's late, you may find that finishing it just silences the irritation. It only silences the angst you feel, right? It doesn't necessarily make you feel better yet. So things like that we would consider to be net negative or net zero. Sometimes finishing something up after it's been late too long, you already lost more energy on the fact that it was late than you were ever going to gain on finishing it, even if you finished on time. You can probably think of things like this yourself. A great idea you had, and you kicked yourself for not making the deadline. And so now you only get to stop being late about it. You don't really get to feel amazing that you took care of it on time. All right, there are other things that start out at net negative or net zero. It's kind of easy to put draining relationships in this category. I think most of us have had a season of life where we were the draining friend. Maybe you're dealing with a lot. Maybe you're having a health challenge and you're in pain, or you just have more needs, or are unable to be the help to kind of give back to the relationship in the way that maybe you used to. So we all had times when we were that net negative drain as far as energy, positive emotional energy is concerned. So when you start thinking in terms of the energy you're investing, when we talk about scavengers of your resources, we're not just talking about the how much it takes, how much comes out. We have to also talk about what that thing is, its value is. That's why we think about the net negative or zero. Take, for example, the draining relationship. You may be in one right now. Just because a lot of your energy is going into that relationship, and maybe you're not getting a lot of help or kudos or even warm and fuzzies back, you might still find it incredibly meaningful to be a resilient friend who sticks by the person who is struggling and continues to invest and care for that person. It might be a very meaningful relationship, even if it's tiring. Who out there is experiencing that? Who out there maybe has a child with special needs, and you know that caring for and supporting their growth matters, even if they can't make you, they personally can't find the words or don't have the skills to make you feel the value. You know the value that you're getting, the value you're creating for your child in caring for them. In that circumstance, you notice how the emotion and the physical and time drain is present, but what you get back in the form of meaning is asymmetrically better. All right, so when we're rewilding, there are really two major reasons or pathways for doing this. One pathway is to introduce a new wild animal, new apex predators. This is what we think of when we realize that our work life has become very rote, or maybe our intellectual growth has become very beige. We're only reading books by people we already agree with who don't really say anything new. Maybe we're in a season where all of our friendships, we just kind of get by with minimal investment. They start to feel surface. We don't feel like we're really making a difference for anybody, or accomplishing something valuable for our community. You're just kind of coasting. Sometimes in that circumstance, we need to introduce something new, some new passion or pursuit. The other pathway is to actually reconnect the meaning and the beauty of the things that are in our life that are big and which matter. These are the two major paths we're talking about today. All right, so you can share in the comments if you already know which pathway you think would help revitalize and rewild your world. When it comes to making the food chain of your life be restored, part of the reason is just to restore the energy and balance your resources. But the other part is that you really can't reach your potential by coasting. You can only ever just exist. So even if you're not in energy crisis right now, you may be very aware that there's more you could do with your potential. Like literally, your life could be bigger than it is. Your impact maybe could be greater. Or you could be more in harmony with what you feel matters the most to you. If that's where you're at, let's rewild our lives. All right. So we kind of start with the top of the food chain, looking for the big, wild, scary, beautiful passion. And that passion is what really gives us the energy we need to power through the challenges and uncertainties of life. When we look at our energy balance, we have to start thinking about the scavengers, the little things that are taking our time. One of the things I made a note of that I wanted to remember was that sometimes we actually form attachments or commit to ourselves in our brain to continue serving what are really scavengers. Things that sometimes we have commitments that we make or assumptions we make that if I am successful, if I'm a good person, if I am doing well compared to my peers, I will, and then you fill in the blank. This happens to a lot of us business people, especially entrepreneurs, where because we don't have a very set pathway of predetermined, you get this degree and you work this job and you create this product, that we try to pattern off of what other successful people have done, our mentors, people we look up to, and we start to collect these expectations of what we should be doing. Social media offers a lot of room for us to borrow the best practices of other people, right? Unfortunately, there's so much more to copy than we could consistently be or do. So at some point, you have to insert your own judgment to decide, am I on Facebook and TikTok and insert social media that's most popular in your industry, right? Does it mean I'm on there? And if so, how often am I on there? And what am I doing on there? How am I building community? Am I trying to create a body of work that people can access? Like, why am I here? And you can't answer those questions about those activities just by looking around. You have to look to the king of the jungle you're trying to live in to say, what is the point? Where are we trying to go? What is the king of the jungle that you are making welcome? What's the difference you're trying to make for people with your business, or for your family, or for yourself? Where are you really going? What do you want to accomplish? So we're gonna talk about that a little bit more as well. But I do want to mention how easy and natural it is for us as human beings to acquire this sense that we need to keep doing everything we've ever started to think we needed to do. It's partly a function of something we call decision maintenance. You can actually hear a great podcast about this by Adam Grant on his Work Life podcast. It's really great. It is something that really looks at how changing our minds is difficult in part because we made up our mind to begin with. As soon as we say we want something or we're going to do something, even when new information comes in that changes the payoff, we still often feel like we need to validate, and we just escalate our commitment to a previous decision that may or may not continue to serve us. So when you start balancing your ecosystem, don't set up little care stations for the overflow of scavengers to make sure they're still being fed. Don't hire people on credit with money you don't have to pay them to do tasks that don't fit in your life when you've rewilded what you're doing, because sometimes those little tasks, those little resource drains, those old commitments need to die. Sometimes you really do have to let the ecosystem balance itself. And that doesn't just mean putting more animals into your world, more projects, more productivity, more people, more help. Right? It doesn't always mean just putting more in. Often, as you get the top of the food chain right, and a lot of the little stuff can finally die out, and you can stop feeding it constantly. Okay? So think into that. If you were to pause this for a second and say, where am I maintaining a decision? Where am I throwing energy that I really am not sure is creating value? I think maybe it's a scavenger. If you were to make a scavenger list, jot down your scavenger list and put a little question mark at the top. You don't have to be certain that all these things have to go, but it puts them kind of in a to be evaluated column, where when you've moved toward more of the big, passionate, meaningful stuff in your life, if they start to be threatened, you let them go extinct instead of remarshaling resources to try to retain them in your kingdom. All right, just a little side note there. I've done this. I think I have lost months and years of progress on things that were very important because I was trying to protect a species that was so far from endangered. I had way too much of it in my life, but I was still committed to doing it the old way, and it didn't need to continue to be done that way. Okay, coffee break. And next bit. Now, this next piece I want to talk about today sounds a little controversial. It's kind of meant to get us thinking. So I want to say that my wish for you here at Wild and Brave is that you stop getting what you deserve. Stop trying so hard to get what you deserve. There is a level on which happiness is a barrier to opportunity. And when we are too focused on what we should be allowed to do, what is reasonable and justified, and what we deserve, we end up looking where we're at. We end up scrabbling over the wrong things, the little things, and we miss out on opportunities. Opportunities and making progress that matters, especially meaningful progress, always involves some level of discomfort. And when we're focused on what we should be able to have, what we should be able to do, we're diverting all we could have to try to protect what we should. That's the big concept. Let's get practical about it. What do we mean by what we should have? This is where I'm talking about my end of a long week on a Friday, when I have packed so much into the day and I'm mentally burnt. I've used every last good idea I have, maybe and then some. Maybe I'm physically tired because I was at the desk all day and I didn't move around as much as I liked. Maybe I'm emotionally drained because I did a lot of things, even like this broadcast. It takes a lot of mental and emotional energy to do something new. So at the end of a week with lots of new, important, meaningful stuff, I might be tapped and think, you know what? I really deserve some downtime. I've done this a lot. I deserve some downtime. I should be allowed. I've used my brilliance all day, and I should just be allowed to veg. I'm gonna Netflix in the bathtub and eat tacos. Maybe I'm gonna have a little fancy beverage with an umbrella in it, and I deserve it. I have worked my butt off this week. And then I go in the bath, I do that, I spend a couple of hours just winding down because I deserve it, instead of following my routine, which is to have something light. If I worked late, which is the example we're talking about, I maybe don't have as much time to have a bubble bath and a taco. I'm not hating on tacos, guys. Definitely love those. But if I follow my rhythm instead of saying I deserve downtime, I would actually have something lighter. I would connect with my family and go to bed on time. And if that allowed me to have a little bit of downtime with some Netflix, fine. But it wouldn't throw caution to the wind and say, I'll just sleep in tomorrow. I should be able to. Now, the difference here is between these two circumstances, it's both my choice. This is not something that's happening to me. But I'm kind of lying to myself when I pretend that the kinder or more well-deserved option is to be not my best self. To, instead of sleeping and getting up and writing, or sleeping and getting up and doing something very meaningful in my routine which really helps restore me consistently, I'm saying I deserve better than my actual life. That somehow not living my life, that vacation from reality, is better than my real life. It may feel true to say the downtime, man, I just need it. And we do need to recover. But there's something about our brains. Our brains, and I've actually been reading a lot about this in, I think it was this one, Indistractable. This one's I'm really enjoying. And the author has a great workbook. I actually didn't plan on talking about this today. But it's called Indistractable by Nir Eyal. And NIR, his nearandfar.com is his website, I think. But it's controlling your attention and choosing your life. And in it, he cites a lot of research about how attention functions, how our cognitive load is. And the funny thing about your brain is that you do suffer from attention fatigue. All of us do. There's a level on which they call it directed attention. Directed attention is a finite resource in the sense that it can be used up and need to be recharged. Some interesting ways that they discovered that you could recharge your directed attention. One of them is called ART, and it is attention recovery therapy. I had to think about that for a second. And it happens by the way they studied it in the research that I was reading was that by taking a 45-minute walk in nature where they have what they call inherently stimulating stimuli, your attention would largely rebound. So if you've been making decisions all day and your executive function, the part of you that chooses and decides and parses difficult information, it gets used. So if you ever hear yourself thinking, man, my brain hurts, or like a friend of mine will say, I can't make one more decision. If it's whether I'm having dinner or not, I can't even decide that. I'm just fried. That's a depleted directed attention. Can't focus on what you're saying right now. My brain is just tapped. If you were to go for a walk in nature where the surroundings draw your attention instead of you having to force yourself to focus on them, that part of your directed attention would actually restore itself. It would charge back up. So directed attention is something that you can actually strengthen. And we're actually talking about attention because it is one of the things that is one of the functions of your brain that shows you how what your brain needs is actually different inputs. Your brain doesn't need to be switched off, it needs to be switched over. It needs variety and change so much more than it needs uh, numbness and emptiness. A lot of what we do in what we consider downtime, we think that it's most helpful because it's not asking anything of our brains. But neurologically speaking, your brain finds the we think of rest as not having to do something. But the life of the cells of your brain happens when they fire. Your brain is alive when electricity flows through it. If neurons don't get enough nourishment through that electrical activity, they weaken. So if you want to think about making your brain happy, you want to be letting it be filled with electricity. You can even get more specific than that and say if you want to have your brain become capable of bigger and better, more exciting things, you would want to be sending electricity to the centers where you're learning, where you're connecting, where you're finding meaning more. Because the more those neurons fire together, they begin to wire together. The more electrical activity you have in your brain as you shift from one activity to another effectively, it allows your brain to be more alive. Doesn't just set it on the shelf while you watch something mind numbing. Now, watching something mind numbing is what I mentioned because it is something that I have fallen into as a way of being nice to myself. Make me feel happy to just watch something, I've already seen, but I know how it's going to turn out. It's just happy, just entertainment. If I want to be able to enjoy and embrace opportunities, sometimes I actually have to let myself stop caring about what I deserve and say, there's more possible. And it's up to me to decide whether I want it or not. No one's going to make me take an opportunity or make an opportunity. I'm the one who has to decide that. So if I'm willing to release my hold on what I should be allowed to do, what's justifiable, no one would give me a hard time for taking some downtime after a long week. But what happens if I keep missing out on the life that could have happened while I'm taking downtime instead? This isn't about running hard all the time. It's about filling your life with enough of a balanced, robust ecosystem of wild, beautiful things that you care about so that you can live your life fully engaged and stop being so depleted by the small stuff and the downtime. All right. The last thing I will say on that, stop getting what you deserve, is that there really is a trap underneath of any time we say I should. I should be able to this. I should have that. Anytime there is an I should, we are stepping out of the driver's seat of our lives and we are litigating. We're kind of arguing the rules with something invisible. Other people, our competition, that inner voice we have. And instead of saying, I should, what if we went after what we could? What could I do? How could I feel closer to this family member I want to grow closer to? How could I make some progress on my professional goals this week? How could I make a little progress on figuring out what my professional goals are this week? You get the idea. Be free of the should. Even if you're shitting on yourself about, I should be trying harder. That's bondage too. So let's move on. One of the tricks, this is actually more of a practical technique that I want to bring to light in case no one's ever talked to you about this concept before. It's very concrete and it gives you something to experiment with, and we love that here at Wild and Brave. So, this topic is about the weekend, and there's something I like to call the weekend drain. There is this drain of our energy that happens when we rev up for the week and crash into the weekend. Or if you flip it around where you're in the weekend, you're pushing to enjoy the weekend as much as you can because and you crash back into the normal week. There's a drain that happens there where we think by pursuing a break from our normal routine, and your weekend may happen in the middle of the week. Not everybody has Saturday and Sunday off, but you have downtime, possibly, that you may think of as your weekend. When you do that, you may be at risk of seeing the weekend time as a break from your life. To the extent that we see ourselves as taking a break from the grind, we are embracing a grind mentality. There's something I like to think about as the average day. When you say an average day, average, it's not our favorite word. We want to be excellent, right? We want to be wild and brave. But when you think about average, your life is filled with so many average days. The normal days make up so much more of the space of your life than the big, crazy ones, or the epically meaningful, or the beautiful escape days, those vacations or moments of achievement, right? Those kind of fall into a small pile while the average day just marches on. If you look at the concept of a weekend and you said, if I didn't separate drudgery from recovery, that's what a weekend mindset is, in the way I'm talking about it at the moment. Separating the drudgery of averageness from the excitement or the comfort of the downtime. And you said, what if I had a life where my average day, the normal day, was deeply meaningful to me? Now, if your work is draining you right now, and you think, well, sure, it'd be nice to have a job I could love every day, but how am I supposed to love every day of my life if I don't have work I'm passionate about? The answer actually falls in this concept of rewilding, where sometimes you need new wild things to come in, and sometimes you can actually find a lot more meaning where you're at, even if you don't think the meaning is there to be had. We'll wrap up with a little bit on cultivating meaning. It's a big topic to tackle, but since it's Monday, we'll touch on it a little to see if it's a topic you want to dig further into. If you'd like to, you can always let us know that you would like to dig more into meaning, and we'll add some content on that here. But if you take this concept and you say, I want to fall in love with my average day, when we step into average thinking, wild and brave average thinking, we say it's not enough for me to chase the extraordinary. Chasing the extraordinary creates patterns of suspended engagement in your life. Waiting for that opportunity. I'm going to be ready for the big job that someone's going to give me someday, or that I'm going to go out and find. I'm going to be ready for that relationship when I finally find somebody. That suspended engagement keeps us from digging in and saying, you know what? Really matters to me that I be able to give myself wholly to something that's really the right thing. or it's a volunteering opportunity. Well, I definitely want to plug in and help, but is this the right opportunity? We're suspending our engagement waiting for extraordinary perfection, and it ends up that we spend our life waiting. And waiting, you don't learn when you're waiting. You don't improve your ideas of what is worth chasing when you're waiting. And you don't experience meaning while you're just waiting for the right opportunity to engage yourself. I like to use this concept of average yields epic in honor of the Olympics, which I'm constantly celebrating. I love the Olympics. It's one of the things in my life that my family laughs at how fanatical I am about the Olympics. But if you think about an Olympian and you set someone right next to me, an Olympian and Morgan Hendrix, Wild and Brave, and you say, what's the difference? What's the difference between us? It isn't actually that the Olympian competed in the Olympics, though that's there. The reason that they competed in the Olympics and I did not is because of how different our average days look. Even when I run, I don't run every day. My average run is nothing like the Olympian's average run, or gymnastics training, or fill in the blank, right? What makes an Olympian isn't competition day. It is their average day. That's what the making of an Olympian is. If you really want to have epic achievement in your life, the thing to cultivate is your average day. You can do that by cultivating habits, by developing your mindset, and by continuing to engage in the growth process within a steady rhythm. If you think of the kind of rhythm you want to have, you want it to be like a heartbeat, something that's structured and with you, but rises and changes to greet the situation. We'll talk more about wild rhythm here, but just think about it. If you stopped feeling like you needed to have mountaintop experiences to chase away uncertainty and confusion and distraction by having big once in a lifetime experiences or achieving these big goals, you might actually find that if you cultivate this average day where every day of your life is spent engaging things that matter to you, you would be able to really lean into and love those big exciting moments. On competition day, you know what most Olympians say? They're more nervous than they've ever been in their life, terrified, nearly sick even, most of them. But what saves them is that they're doing something that they have been doing every day. And they click into the routine of the average day. Their average day is what allows them to be their best on competition day. And that's how it can be for you too. All right, so if you're going to do this, if you're going to say, yes, all right, I'm in. I want to be an Olympian in my own life. I want to be able to have opportunities, big, beautiful, exciting opportunities that I'm ready for, that I can take advantage of. I'm gonna go for that average day. I'm gonna even be open to surrendering the weekend mindset that says I deserve a break. I deserve downtime, and say, downtime from my life? Why don't I fill my life with the wild, beautiful things? Maybe it's going to ask a lot of me. Maybe I'm going to be stretched and have to grow. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, but give me that big life. All right? Maybe you take that. In order to get there, you do need to look at what you don't love about your daily grind and see, what is it? What is it you don't love about the everyday? If there's something you think would make your life more wild and brave, bigger, more welcoming of opportunities, something that would make you stronger and more competitive in the workplace, make you more skilled in your relationships, what would it be? If doing that thing is going to be uncomfortable, Talk to yourself about why that discomfort might be keeping you from starting. All right. At the end of today, I do want to look for 1 second at where meaning comes from. Because meaning is really what makes something a wild, big apex predator in the ecosystem of our lives. Meaning, I've actually been reading a book by, let's see, it's called The Power of Meaning, Crafting a Life That Matters, and it's by Emily Esfahani Smith. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right. I haven't heard her speak yet. She's put together a very I've just started it about 20% of the way through the book. She's put together a very thoughtful and interesting assessment of a lot of what research has been done on how those of us who experience meaning and satisfaction, that sense of our life matters and we feel fulfilled. What is that? What gives that to us? And how can every human being cultivate more? All right. And some of the things she's looked at, I got my kind of notes everywhere. One way she condensed it, and she borrows from Michael Steger in his Meaning of a Life, a Unified Model. It's a pretty cool piece in the Oxford Handbook of Positive Psychology. And Roy Baumeister in Meanings of Life, also a good book. But she kind of condenses this to say there are 3 conditions that need to be met for your life to be meaningful. If Emily was talking to me, she would probably say, Morgan, there are 3 conditions for a wild and brave ecosystem of meaning in your life. Number 1, you got to believe that you are part of something that is significant and worthwhile. That's number 1. Got to be part of something that is significant and worthwhile. Number 2, you do need to believe that your life makes sense. There's a lot of chaos that happens out there, but if you don't find ways to understand and talk productively with yourself and sometimes others about your life, you will struggle to feel the meaning come all the way home. And number 3, you have to be driven by purpose. Purpose. It's that I'm doing this thing. Some people, like Albert Camus, even uses the term and puts it in quotation marks, the thing. You have to have the thing. What is your thing that fills you with purpose? Something that you sense is deeply worthwhile, meaningful. And how are you spending yourself toward the thing that is meaningful? That is where that sense of a wildly, bravely satisfied life comes from. A life where your average day fills you. It makes something out of you, and it allows you to really enjoy who you have and are becoming. All right, so those are 3 conditions for a meaningful life. There are a lot of ways to approach this. One of them, and we like to try to get pretty specific here at Wild and Brave so we can all be taking action. It's a little large of a topic, but for where deep work is concerned, one of the big pieces of developing a deep work practice is finding ways to consistently invest your mental energy and focus into something where you are actually doing some sort of work. Could be intellectual work, it could be physical work. Artists and artisans, you say, someone who physically makes stuff, often have more of a sense of being able to understand that the work itself is something they can give their energy to. Sometimes knowledge workers like myself, we can feel a little disconnected from the work because it's words on a page or sounds going out into the phone or the Zoom line, right? But being able to give yourself to the work and to tell yourself stories about your place in the world is part of how you really engage your ecosystem and you engage that meaning. Uh, Lots of topics we've covered today. When you think about how your resource balance is your life full of distractions and the time and energy scavengers? Do you have a clear sense of what big meaningful purpose you're serving day to day, the average day, not the once in a while, not the thing you hope to give yourself to when you finally find something big enough? Where are you today? Give it some thought. We'd love to hear your feedback. We actually have a lot of different things that we are offering right now at Wild and Brave as far as free content that you can enjoy. One is just if you have questions that you'd like answered directly and you're not able to join us live, you can email me personally at morgan@wildandbrave.com. I want to hear what you have to say, and I love both your feedback and your questions, so you can reach out to me there. If you want to dive more into meaning, you can ask me about that too, and we can develop some content here free on YouTube. You can also get a free content digest by email as we make more content here on the channel. You could just have a simple email that shows you recent things that we've published so you can focus your time spent watching. And last but not least, if you'd like to experience one-on-one coaching, you can get that free at wildandbrave.com/free coaching. We would love for you to have a Wild and Brave coaching experience where you think into topics like this together. You may be ready to rewild your life. You may really feel a closeness to this concept of restoring your energy by bringing the big, beautiful, scary, wild and brave things to life, getting away from that weekend mindset to love your average day. You can be an Olympian in your own life. That's what I want more of in my life. So let's do it together. If you'd like to join me next week, we will be having our topic, design a routine that works for you. This topic is week 3 in our deep work practice. Honestly, between you and me, I don't know how I'm going to fit everything in that I feel like we might want to talk about how to design a routine that works for you. We're going to do our best to look at what type of thinking and strategy actually supports that wild rhythm, something that isn't so confining that you're constantly failing it, but it has enough structure that you're not wearing out your executive decision making, constantly changing plans. What does that wild rhythm look like where you have structure and flexibility? We're really going to dive into that next week here live Monday at 10 Eastern. I'd love to have you join us or catch the replay. If you would like to just kind of get in your head when we're live here on YouTube, we're shooting Mondays and Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. We've started that since the 21st, and we're going to continue through the summer. We are excited to interact with you here about some of these topics that if we chew on them even just a little, they bring up our awareness where we can live more wild and brave every day. I'm Coach Morgan, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. Thank you for being part of our Build a Deep Work practice. Hope we see you next week. Make yourself at home on our channel. And we are a new channel, so your subscribe makes a difference for us. If you haven't subscribed yet, we would love to have you hit that red button. And we promise to keep bringing just the best content we possibly can. Have a great day and be wild and brave.